The water fuel cell. In 1998, in a quiet Ohio suburb, inventor Stanley Meyer walked out of a restaurant mid-lunch and collapsed in the parking lot. Witnesses heard his last words before he died. "They poisoned me." Minutes earlier, he had been discussing an invention that, if true, would have rewritten the world's energy economy. A car powered not by gasoline, but by water. Stanley Meyer wasn't a crank. He held patents for a water fuel cell, gave multiple public demonstrations, and attracted the attention of both venture capitalists and intelligence agencies. His device, mounted on a modified dune buggy, reportedly split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen using a process called electrolytic dissociation. But Meyer claimed his version used so little electricity that it broke the known laws of thermodynamics. In other words, it worked but shouldn't have. His water-powered car was filmed running across highways, sputtering softly as vapor trailed from the exhaust. No gasoline, no emissions, only water. He turned the ignition with the words, "This is the future." The US Department of Energy never officially tested the device. Still, Meyer's claims gained traction. Media outlets covered his work. He was contacted by NATO scientists. Foreign interests, some allegedly from the Middle East, reportedly tried to purchase the technology outright. He refused. The day of his death, Meyer was dining with two Belgian investors. His brother, Stephen Meyer, recalled that Stanley burst out of the restaurant, clutching his throat, vomited, and collapsed. The cause of death was ruled a cerebral aneurysm. No toxins were detected. No further investigation was pursued. The prototype car was taken. The patents lapsed. The workshop was emptied. Later, researchers who tried to replicate Meyer's design found that the core schematics had inconsistencies, as if key details were removed or altered. Some claimed the energy input required far exceeded the output. Others noted that Meyer used unconventional components, non-standard transformers, pulse frequency circuits, and resonance tuning, suggesting he had discovered a very specific unstable configuration that was never publicly documented. To this day, the location of the original water fuel cell is unknown. The patents, though public, are incomplete. Engineers who attempted to recreate the effect often report equipment failure, shorted circuits, or unexplained burnouts. Forums discussing Meyer's work are flooded with conflicting data, lost links, and dead ends. If Stanley Meyer truly invented a way to run engines on water, it would have made the oil industry obsolete, destabilized geopolitical power, and restructured the global economy overnight. And if that's what his invention threatened, then someone had every reason to ensure it never left the garage. The electric car recall. In 1996, under tight security and a rare sense of optimism, General Motors released the EV1, the world's first mass-produced electric vehicle. It was sleek, silent, and decades ahead of its time. Leaseholders in California and Arizona were among the first to drive a car that didn't rely on a single drop of gasoline. The vehicle moved with such smooth precision that drivers described it as gliding on air. But within just a few years, every single EV1 was hunted down, recalled, and destroyed by the very company that built it. The EV1 wasn't a prototype. It was a functioning electric vehicle with a 100 meters range, regenerative braking, and zero emissions. It had its own support infrastructure. Charging stations were built across major cities, and GM invested heavily in marketing it as the future. Despite the limitations of battery technology at the time, the EV1 exceeded expectations. Drivers adored it. There were waiting lists for new leases. But something shifted. By 1999, rumors spread that GM was no longer enthusiastic about the program. The lease agreement strangely never allowed anyone to buy the vehicle outright. In 2002, GM began systematically repossessing all EV1s, even from satisfied drivers willing to pay to keep them. Some resisted. A few even offered to buy their cars at full market price. GM refused. One by one, the cars were removed from the streets and transported to a fenced-off desert lot in Arizona. There, most were crushed. No technical recall was ever issued. No fatal flaws were revealed. The official explanation cited maintenance costs, battery limitations, and lack of consumer demand. But documents later revealed that GM, along with other automakers and oil industry representatives, had quietly lobbied California to roll back its zero-emission vehicle mandate, a law that had originally compelled GM to create the EV1 in the first place. Internal memos hinted at something deeper, concerned that the EV1 would trigger an infrastructure overhaul, threatening gasoline sales, engine part supply chains, and even the business models of dealerships, which relied heavily on repairs. Electric vehicles needed fewer repairs, fewer oil changes, fewer replacement parts, too few profit points. A handful of EV1s survived, mostly in museums, gutted of their drivetrains, rendered immobile. Former engineers and program leads spoke out years later, calling the cancellation a corporate execution. Chris Payne's 2006 documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car, presented compelling evidence that the EV1 didn't fail. It was silenced. Today, electric cars dominate headlines. But long before Tesla, Rivian, or Lucid, the EV1 existed and then almost deliberately did not. What changed wasn't the technology. What changed was who was allowed to profit from it. The Tesla Power Tower. In 1901, on a windswept cliff in Shoreham, New York, a massive structure began to rise. A strange skeletal tower designed not for war nor communication, but to deliver energy invisibly through the air. At its center was Nikola Tesla, the brilliant and erratic inventor who claimed he had discovered a way to transmit limitless electrical power without wires. He called it the Wardenclyffe Tower. He said it could light up the world, but within a few short years, the project was abandoned, its funding pulled, and the tower demolished. Tesla's dream wasn't fantasy. His earlier experiments had proven it was possible to transmit radio waves across long distances. But the Wardenclyffe Tower aimed for something far greater. Wireless transmission of electrical power using the Earth's natural resonance. The tower's copper dome, buried grounding rods, and high-voltage coils weren't just architectural curiosities. They were carefully tuned to Tesla's theories of planetary vibration. His vision was simple, terrifying, and revolutionary. A global grid of towers transmitting free electricity to any receiver on the planet. No wires, no power companies, no meters, no control. Initially funded by JP Morgan, the project was cloaked in mystery. Tesla spoke publicly about sending messages across the Atlantic, even communicating with Mars. But privately, he revealed to Morgan that his true goal was to bypass the entire centralized energy industry. That was the moment everything changed. Morgan pulled the funding. No other financier stepped forward. Construction halted in 1905. By 1917, the tower was torn down, allegedly for scrap. Official reasons cited bankruptcy and technical limitations, but internal correspondences and later interviews painted a darker picture. Tesla's plan, if successful, would have rendered the emerging energy monopolies obsolete. Morgan famously asked, "Where do we put the meter?" A question that exposed the core problem. Power without profit was a threat, not a breakthrough. Tesla's notebooks from the Wardenclyffe era went missing after his death. Some were reportedly seized by the U.S. Office of Alien Property, though none involved foreign nationals. Others were quietly auctioned or never seen again. The most complete remaining diagrams hint at a working system, one we still don't fully understand. Decades later, modern engineers attempting to recreate the design encounter inexplicable failures. Arcs that should occur but don't, resonances that vanish mid-test. Tesla himself hinted that the system required not just machinery, but planetary alignment, a convergence of electromagnetic conditions that once broken may never be recoverable. If the Wardenclyffe Tower had functioned as Tesla intended, the world would not look like it does today. The age of wires, batteries, and fossil fuel grids might never have begun. But the tower was dismantled, and with it, the only chance humanity may have had for energy without chains, the eternal light bulb. In a fire station in Livermore, California, a single light bulb has been glowing since 1901. Nicknamed the Centennial Bulb, it hangs quietly from the ceiling, emitting a soft amber light 24 hours a day. The bulb has survived world wars, earthquakes, and technological revolutions. It has outlived every other device in the building. Most astonishingly, it still works over 120 years later. This small object, barely noticed by the world, might be the strongest evidence of a truth few dared to speak aloud, that we were once capable of building things to last forever and then chose not to. Manufactured by the Shelby Electric Company in the late 19th century, the bulb was crafted using a hand-blown glass envelope, thick filament coils, and materials that modern light bulbs no longer include. Scientists examining its longevity point to the filament, carbon-based and slowly burning, unlike the modern tungsten designs that burn brighter but fail faster. And yet, the Centennial bulb is not a one-time anomaly. In the early 1900s, other bulbs from the same era lasted decades. Some remained lit for over 60 years in factories and mines. But something shifted in the 1920s. That shift had a name: the Phoebus Cartel. In 1924, a secretive alliance formed between the world's largest light bulb manufacturers, General Electric, Philips, Aurum, and others. Their goal was not to improve the bulb, but to limit its lifespan. Documents later uncovered revealed that the cartel agreed to artificially cap bulb longevity at 1,000 hours. Engineers who submitted bulbs lasting longer were reprimanded. Designs were deliberately altered. The result was an early and powerful form of planned obsolescence. Customers would be forced to buy more bulbs more often. Profits soared, and the world quietly forgot that a longer-lasting light source had ever been possible. Attempts to revive the old designs have met resistance. Original Shelby manufacturing records are sparse. Labs that reverse-engineered the Centennial bulb's composition discovered a formula incompatible with modern mass production methods. Not because the materials are rare, but because they don't align with the supply chains and business models built on constant replacement. The Centennial bulb is still glowing. It has its own live webcam feed, watched by thousands who marvel at its endurance. But its existence raises a chilling question. If we once knew how to build something to last more than a century, what else have we learned and then buried in the name of control? The Eastern Air Cleaner. In the early 1990s, deep within the crumbling industrial zones of post-Soviet Eastern Europe, a team of engineers unveiled a machine that promised to make air pollution a thing of the past. Developed in secret by a group of former military scientists in the outskirts of Kyiv, Poland, the device was small, boxy, and completely silent. It could purify the air of an entire room in minutes, not just of dust or smoke, but of toxic industrial chemicals, airborne viruses, and microscopic pollutants down to the atomic level. The prototype operated using a type of cold plasma filtration combined with an electrostatic field that altered the charge of airborne particles. As contaminants passed through the device, they were not just captured. They were deconstructed, their molecular bonds broken apart without releasing secondary emissions. It needed no filter replacements, it used almost no power, and it worked. Demonstrations stunned independent testers. In one test, the machine cleared formaldehyde and benzene from a sealed chamber within 11 minutes. In another, it reduced PM2, 5 pollution in a warehouse by 98.6% within an hour. The team presented their findings to regional governments and international environmental groups. Initial reactions were enthusiastic. One official reportedly called it the most disruptive environmental technology of the decade, but within weeks, the project was quietly shuttered. The reasons were vague. Bureaucratic complications, patent issues, lack of industrial compliance certifications, but behind the scenes, the team reported increasingly hostile encounters. Their lead engineer was interrogated during a custom stop. Shipment crates containing new units vanished during transit. Funding contracts were suddenly revoked, and labs were ordered to cease all collaboration. By 1994, the development company had closed. The core team dispersed across Europe. Years later, one member anonymously claimed that a corporate syndicate with ties to HVAC manufacturers and prochemical companies had bought out the remaining shares and buried the project under layers of shell ownership. No working prototype remains in public hands. Attempts to reproduce the system using the surviving schematics have all failed. Researchers say key elements are missing, particularly details involving the plasma ignition chamber and frequency harmonics. There are whispers that certain materials used in the original build were restricted after 1995, citing dual-use concerns under European export laws. Strangely, some surviving documents list medical applications for the technology, suggesting it could sterilize hospital rooms, neutralize airborne pathogens, and suppress transmission of viral outbreaks. None of those uses were ever explored. In a world choking on urban smog, living through respiratory pandemics, and battling rising asthma rates, the absence of a technology like this feels less like a loss and more like an eraser. If we once held the key to cleaning the air completely, why was it taken away? And more importantly, who decided we weren't allowed to breathe it?